Hello, my name is Reverend Thomas Coughin. I was born deaf. I come from a deaf family. My parents and my grandparents are deaf as well. I'm from a small city in New York. It's actually near Canada. The city's name is Maloney. I also have three sisters. All three of them are hearing. Two of them are interpreters for the deaf, and they both have a great job. They also both married two husbands that are deaf and have wonderful babies. I went to school in New York called Rochester, New York, and that college would fingerspell every day. I went there from when I was born to about 12 years old. And my parents decided me to send to a camp in New York, so as I went there, I stayed there for 2 weeks. It was a Catholic camp for children. And my parents went there and met the nun, and as the nun met my parents, they told my parents that I should go to a Catholic school, St. Mary's Parish for the Deaf, and she recommended that place. And my parents thought about it, thought that would be a good idea to go to a Catholic high school for a good environment, because they wanted the best for me. Then they decided that I would go there. And I went there for about 8 or 9 years. It was a completely different environment, a different school than what I'm used to. When I was there, I learned a lot about religion. The nuns taught me about God every day, and that praying was very important. When I was about 16 or 17 years old, I became more interested in religion. And one day, one of the nuns in my high school gave me a book, and the book's name was the Reverend Roll. And so I read that, and it was about a man who became a Catholic monk, and he decided to become a monk, and the process of how to become a monk. Anyway, the book was about his life. It was an autobiography, and I was very interested. I was very fascinated with the concept of becoming a monk. I never thought about this idea before, but I asked if I could have more books, and I continued reading more and more about him, and I decided I was addicted and hooked on the idea of becoming a priest or a monk. So then I thought what I wanted to do when I graduate. My parents wanted me to go to Gallaudet University, but I was contemplating between going to Gallaudet University or becoming a priest. I asked people if I should become a priest, and most people said I should not, because hearing people don't think deaf people can become a priest because of lack of communication, and communicating with the people that go to church is extremely important. And many people, I believed them, but in my heart I was like, I should try to become a priest, but everyone kept telling me no. But then I was pondering about it, and then I finally decided that I would go ahead with my heart. I sent applications out to different colleges, seminaries, and I actually got rejected quite a few times. And then I kept seminaries. I applied to so many different ones, and I just got rejected. And I thought, okay, I'll try one more time. And I tried one more time. But I didn't include that I was deaf. I didn't say anything about my background, and I just sent the application without saying that I was deaf. And they actually sent me a message back, but they didn't. For about 3 to 4 months, we were communicating, sending back messages, and then the priest kept asking me about my background, where am I from, where did I go to school. But then I felt really stuck, like I was in a pickle, because the school is called St. Mary's Parish of the Deaf. At the end it said deaf, and deaf seemed like a bad word because no one would accept me. So I wrote back, and I told them that I'm an all-American oriented deaf boy. And I was hoping that they would just read everything except the deaf. I didn't want them to see that. Then they sent me a letter back. I opened it and I read it, and they were shocked. They said, I didn't know you were deaf. I don't know if we can accept a deaf boy going into priesthood, because of the communication issues. But the bottom line, I kept reading, and the last line on the paper said that they will ask the principal of the school, and I will send the information about your background and everything about you. So the priest and the principal of the school debated, and they talked about if they should accept me or not, and because I was deaf. But then they asked me to go there, fly there, meet them in person, and I was very hesitant because I've never been there without an interpreter. It was 1767. I need a way to communicate with them. 1967. So I decided I would fly there. And when I arrived there, I met the priest, and I felt I was nervous. But then he talked to me and he asked, "Can I read lips?" And I said, "Yeah." So then we kept talking, and they read my lips, and then the other priest came up to me and said that the boss would like to meet you in the office. So I went into the office, and the priest introduced me to him, and then me and the boss he introduced me, and we shook hands. And then all of a sudden, he asked me, I felt like it wasn't right. Maybe I misunderstood him, but he asked me how tall I am. And I was like, I flew all this way to just talk about how tall I am? I was very shocked, but I responded saying I'm 5'10", and he was astounded that I could read his lips and I understood him. And he's like, "But you're deaf, you can't communicate." He could not believe it. He was dumbfounded. And then he asked me, how did I read lips and how can you communicate? And I responded by, I went to school for a long time and they taught me how to do that. And then he asked me how old I am, and I responded, I'm 21 years old. And he's like, "That's impossible. This is impossible." He laughed, and he was laughing. And then he told me that he was worried about me being deaf and not being able to, and that I couldn't be able to communicate. And I wasn't sure if I should accept you. Right now I won't hire you. But then I realized I understood how he felt, that he was nervous. And we both made eye contact, but that we were both nervous. We both saw eye to eye because we were both nervous. And then for hours we talked. He asked me questions. We talked about different people. It was just amazing. And then out on the street he saw some people signing, and he asked me, can most people read lips? And I said, yeah, most people can read lips, but it's better if they have an interpreter. So then I flew back to New York, and I continued school, and I received a letter that said I was accepted into that seminary. And this was the start of reality. Before this, I had a deaf family, deaf teachers, deaf classmates. I was able to sign. But now this is the real world. This is the hearing world, where I have to go out and be able to communicate with hearing people and be able to fight for my right. I wasn't sure if I could do it. I knew it was going to be very difficult. But my education and my training, they taught me how to communicate. They taught me the process, and so I felt a lot of confidence, but I was very patient too. My first night I went into the seminary, I was crying. I was so sad. I missed my friends, my relatives. I missed that communication. So first night I got to meet a group of men. It's called the seminary. It's where the boy will become into a priest. So everyone was talking and sitting down, and a man came up to me and asked me, "What's your name?" And I told him I'm Coughin, and he gave me a weird look and that said that he didn't understand me. And I was like, I know I'm not perfect. But then he left. I felt very sad, and I realized it's not easy to communicate with people who don't really know how to have ever experienced deaf people before. And before, life was so much easier. Now it's a lot harder because now I actually have to be able to read lips, understand that each person is different. And that boy came again, and he asked me if I could teach him some sign language, like the ABCs, the alphabets. So then I taught him, and then it was a process. It was definitely a process, but I know that's one of the challenges I will have to face going out into the hearing world, being a deaf person. My goal to become a priest was actually in high school, and I accomplished that by being able to go in the seminary. And I actually I had my bachelor's in English from Gallaudet University. After I finished there, I went to a 5-year training to become a priest. My first year was thinking about my future, praying, and when I finished my first year, I went to a Catholic university where I studied theology, and that was the study of God. And I also learned psychology and a bunch of other subjects. I had an interpreter with me during lecture, and my first semester when I took my test, I failed it. And I was confused because I had studied, and I realized there's a different world of studying. It's a different idea of how to study theology. Theology is a whole different concept, a whole different language that I am not used to. So the interpreter thought it was her fault that I failed, but it really wasn't. It was mine because I didn't study as much as I should have. I could have quit. I could have given up because it's hard for a deaf person to study theology and become a priest. But then I thought, I'm going to try again. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to try again. So I took the test again in 2 weeks. I studied rigorously. I didn't stop. I kept studying. And then I got a C. And then I realized I needed to study harder than I did before. All of my other classmates were able to study. I weren't studying as hard as I was because they could all communicate with each other. And I missed those little information that they can all hear. 4 years had finally finished. I got my degree. I was shocked. I didn't think I would be able to do it. There were about 38 students who had taken that master's degree test. 17 had passed, and I was one of those 17 people who have passed. My other classmates, we all studied, but they were hearing, but they failed. And I asked, why didn't you pass? And they said that they didn't study hard enough. And I realized that it's key. It's so important to study, to be able to build your reading skills. I am so appreciative of my teachers, my family, everyone who has forced me to read, but I ended up loving it. That definitely developed my skills to be able to read. If you don't read, you can't become successful. So after I got my master's degree, I wanted to become an ordained priest. And I actually was the first deaf man to become an ordained priest. In other countries, South America, Africa, they each had 2 or 3 deaf priests. I was the first one in North America. I was so excited. And then I was actually asked to work as a international priest, and I accepted, and I traveled all across the world, and we went to different meetings, and I met so many different people. And my last year of that job, I went to Malaysia, India, China. I visited so many different areas. I can't tell you how many people I've met and heard their stories about their life, and how many people have been successful and failed. It really made me humble. I can't believe how successful I really am, because each person has their own ability to be successful. Each person can do it. Most deaf people aren't successful because they give up. No, what they really need to do is they need to keep trying. The goal is to just keep going. The goal is to achieve your goal. I've been a priest for 13 years. I can't explain. The time has gone by so fast. Now, I actually currently am moved to Hawaii. I was asked for a job to help develop a program, and they asked me if I wanted to be here for 3 to 4 years. So I left